Good morning, John.
Good morning.
Good morning. Do you know what the temperature is outside?
17 degrees, supposedly. That's what the device next to me says.
Yeah, and then if there's wind, it's a little cooler than that even. But not too bad yet, the wind.
Yeah, at least there's 2 digits to the temperature,
True.
and it doesn't start with a minus sign.
That's true. All good things.
I'm turning my volume, putting myself on mute because I have people doing work in the house.
Oh, okay, John.
Good morning.
Oh, good morning, Esther.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, I'm okay.
You're back home?
I'm at my mother's house now.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. A lot of work, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy.
No, it's a whole lifetime here.
I know. Yeah.
The furniture, everything, you know.
And the memories, the photos, and
Oh, yes.
wow.
I found a love letter my dad wrote to my mother in the early 60s. Yeah.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
cute.
I'd
That's
never
nice.
seen it before. Yeah, my mother kept it, of course. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
very nice.
yeah. Yeah.
Wow. But she had a long life and good life, did
Mm-hmm.
she? That's yeah. How old was she when she passed away?
96.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
May we all live so long.
Yes. Amen. That is true.
And I remember a few years ago you said you went dancing together. So she was
Yeah.
dancing in her 90s. That's great.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
We went to the villages in or near Orlando, sort of in Florida.
Oh,
And
uh-huh.
every night they had an outdoor band, and people just got up and danced, and we had a
Yeah.
wonderful time.
Yeah. They do
Yeah.
it in Vermont
Oh,
during the summer. They dance in the streets.
yeah.
Yeah, and they have concerts. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
Wow. But she lived alone in her house
She
until,
did. She had an aide twice a week.
wow, good for
Yeah.
her.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. She was very independent and, strong body, strong will
Yeah.
until
Wow.
it got weaker. Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Well,
enjoying your
96
vacation?
is a nice.
Your
Am
time
I?
in semesters?
Can we call it a vacation? Well, we went to Vermont, to New Hampshire with the kids. My daughter came with her family, and our non-joined with his children, and they went skiing, but I was babysitting and in charge of
Yeah.
the food. And you know how it is, you go to a place, you don't have a kosher kitchen, you don't have food. So I took care of all of these kind of things, and it was nice. It was a beautiful cabin, and they enjoyed it. We went,
Yeah.
a little bit outside,
Yeah.
but it was nice.
Yeah.
Short, and then they all came to us for Hanukkah.
Oh, nice.
Not the whole Hanukkah, but Shabbat and Sunday and Monday. Yeah. So it was nice.
Yeah, yeah. It's good to have off these weeks in between semesters. You can do things. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's a lot of work. So I'm
Yeah.
doing work and yeah,
True.
a lot of work. I'm still working on the syllabi. I have 3 classes that I have to work on. And,
Well, good morning to Heather and
hello, good
Bill
morning, Heather.
and
Good
Yeah, good
morning.
morning,
Gilbert.
Three
Bill.
classes is a lot to prepare.
I know. Yes, but
Yeah.
you know how it is. You're not just teaching. You're in charge of this and you're in charge of that, and you
Of
have,
course.
yeah, a faculty advisor of this, and So
Yeah. A
it's
lot of duties,
moving.
extra duties.
Though those who do a good job get more piled on.
Lots of papers. I'm trying to get rid of papers, and it keeps accumulating.
Yeah.
So
Papers grow on flat surfaces.
so I should have here heels. Yeah.
We're gonna have the mute off because we have construction going. We're gonna have mute on because we have construction going on in our house.
Oh.
Okay.
Nice.
Good
Okay,
morning,
Rabbi
all.
Cheses.
Good
Boker
morning.
tov.
Boker tov.
Good to see everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Hope everyone is succeeding and staying warm. Definitely putting our heat to good use this week. But we avoided the big snowstorm, which is to the west of us.
Yes, yeah, I
I was
know.
in New York yesterday, and we got some of it there. But my family members who I was with for a family wedding yesterday were all in, St. Louis or from Columbus or Cleveland, and they got it pretty bad.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
Was it New York City that got the snow, Rabbi?
not much. It was really just
Thank you.
an inch or two when we were there. We were on Long Island. But
Washington got the most snow they gotten in 20 years.
Really, how high was it?
That's beyond me.
But I heard
All
all
I
the
can do is
museums are
All I can
closed
do is
in
report the news.
Washington. all
I'm
the
not into
schools.
numbers.
Yeah, it's a lot for them.
yeah.
Yeah, but St. Louis got a lot, I think. 15
Yeah.
inches, was it?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we just have the cold, and we'll bundle up for the next week or so, because it doesn't look like it's going to give up for a while.
Shabbos is supposed to be back in the 30s.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, I'll take it. We have a busy Shabbat with a scholar in residence coming, or by Dr. Zev Elef, and also the Jewish a cappella group from Yale, Magevet, is coming to share.
nice.
So
And I'm missing all of these. It's so annoying. I belong to the community and I'm not belonging to anything. I mean, I'm not enjoying the beautiful things that you're having.
Maybe
yeah.
we should move
Far.
everything to your house.
Yeah, okay, please come over.
Or
Here.
stay with our known. I'm sure he could host you.
Yeah, but you don't want to, they have their own
Yeah,
lives, they have their own friends, and I don't
right.
want to intrude.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I understand. So one of the topics that I typically talk about every Parshat Vayechi is one that I will not be able to speak about this year because we have so many other things going on. And so I took a piece from the Eish Tamid that we've been learning together that relates to it, which is end of life affairs. It's an important topic that I've brought to our community's attention many a time. As sometimes sitting where I sit, I have to help out families that have not made arrangements before absolutely necessary, and oftentimes a lot of stress, a lot of tension is triggered when decisions with great consequence need to be made under the gun in terms of the timeline and the urgency of it. So for today, we're gonna use the Parsha to talk about the decision that Yaakov makes to make sure that his sons know his wishes for where he wants to be buried, the location in which he wants to find ultimate rest. And I should, of course, note that our learning and our gathering, we have in mind Janice, your mother, who joined us on several occasions as part of our Tuesday morning club. We are thinking of her and hope that our learning serves as a merit for her neshama.
Thank you, Rabbi. I'm in her home now.
Yes. Can you remind us of her Hebrew name with her father's name, which is typically what we do in terms of learning?
It's Rivka Petal Bas Yitzchak.
Okay, well, you should continue to be inspired by her remarkable life, and our learning should serve as a zechut for her neshama.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'm gonna make it a little larger. Actually, remember this time before anybody nudged me. So you should be impressed that it is possible to get better at things. Okay. So we are familiar with the basic instructions that Yaakov gives his children as he winds down. And we're going to specifically take a look at the relationship between the instructions that Yaakov gives and the instructions that Yosef gives. Because in this parsha, we have the passing of both Yaakov and Yosef, right? There's a long time span between the two, and a very similar set of instructions that's handed down to the next generation in terms of the location of the burial. So we'll read in source number 1 here, Vayikrevu Yemei Yisrael Lamut. So the time approached for Yaakov to pass. How did he know? He knew. Some people have a sense. Some people can be aware of their own deterioration, their own weakness, their own sort of status. Most people do not know, but some people have a sense, and they're able to preempt the transition by saying goodbye, by making some final arrangements. So Yaakov was not at the place where he was so compromised that he couldn't speak or couldn't think clearly, but he was at a place of at least inability to move because he is constrained to his bed at this point, right? And it's within a matter of days at this point in which he makes these instructions, takes care of the arrangements for his burial, and then he passes. So somehow he knew, and the Mefarshim have various explanations of how he knew, whether it was just a sense of his body or whether it was a calculation that he made based on how many years he was promised to live, which were less than his father Yitzchak. So there are different ways of understanding how he knew that this would be an appropriate time to give these instructions. Go ahead, Jill.
Before you go further, can I just ask, why does the Parsha refer to Yaakov as Yisrael here, and further down it goes back to Yaakov?
It's a great question. The rabbis say that the default after the name change with the wrestling match between the angel and Yaakov is to go to Israel. When he is referred to as by his name after that point, the default is Yisrael, unless there is a reason to call him Yaakov. And each context provides a reason for Yaakov, and usually so one approach is to say that Yisrael is usually referred to is usually utilized when it's referring to his role as the father of a people. And Yaakov is when it's more about domestic sort of father activity. So we can sort of check that out. Whereas here, right, when he's asking about his arrangements for burial, we could say that he's acting as the patriarch who wants to be buried in Eretz Yisrael. Whereas at the deathbed scene at the end of this parak, right, there's only at the end of the not this parak, but at the end of his life, his deathbed scene is where he's more of a father than a figurehead.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Good close read. So Vayikravu Yimei Yisrael Lamut, Vayikra Livno Liosef. And who does he call? Not Reuven, not his firstborn, not Yehuda, who's really emerged as the sort of leader of the brothers, but he calls Yosef. So usually you have all your children, or even or at least your firstborn involved in making arrangements. So why here does he call Yosef and Yosef alone?
He can help with it.
Practically, he has the power, he has the authority, he has
Mhm.
the jurisdiction to make such an arrangement to bury somebody living in Egypt outside of Egypt, which is a heavy ask, right? Because Egyptians, as we know from the Book of Death, have a huge culture around burial, around what's Vayichan too? They embalming, right, and putting right, making of mummies, and there was there's so much of their ancient religion that revolved around death that it was quite offensive for somebody to be requesting to not be buried in the land of Egypt itself. And so Yaakov knew that to make this request, he had to make it of Yosef, who would know politically how to navigate this special request. So this request was being made to the person who had the power to accommodate it. So Vayomer lo, and he said to him, Imna matzati chen be'einecha, if you have found favor in my eyes, simna yadcha tacha irechi, right? Place your hand on my groin, which was in antiquity a mechanism of promise, of making a swear that you would complete a certain act. We see the same thing with Eliezer and Avraham, when Avraham says, don't take a daughter from the local women, but make sure to get one from Eretz Canaan. So we see this in several stories. V'asita imadi chesed ve'emet, and please do for me this act of kindness and of truth. Al na tikbarei Mitzrayim, don't bury me in Egypt. I came down here to see you. I came down here to reunite the family. I came down here because it was Jewish destiny, but I don't want to be here for all of eternity. And of course, as we've noted in past years, and as we noted every funeral that I officiate at, this phrase of chesed and emet, Rashi says here that the act of burial is the highest form of chesed. It's the truest form of kindness because it's a kindness that can never be reciprocated. Usually, kindness that we do has the potential to benefit us because we give and then we receive. We give to a community when we are at the top of the circle, and then when we're at the bottom of the circle, we're on the receiving end. But the act of burial, that kindness of blanketing someone with earth, is nothing they can ever repay. And so that's why this formula of Yaakov is significant here, that it's, Rashi calls it chesed shel emet. It's a kindness of the truest form, in that there's nothing that he can ever give back in return for completing this act. Okay, so he makes this swear, he makes this commitment. I mean, Yosef makes this commitment. He pledges that he will indeed bury his father outside the land of Egypt. Where outside the land of Egypt? So he clarifies here, V'shachavti im avotai, I want to lie down with my fathers. So where is Yitzchak and Abraham buried?
Cave of Machpelah.
Right, exactly. So in Ma'arat HaMachpelah, so in order for me to lie with my fathers, unisatani mimitzrayim, I need you to lift me up and carry me, carry my bones from the land of Egypt, ukvaratani bikvuratam, and to bury them, my bones, that is, in their burial place, which is in Ma'arat HaMachpelah. So it's quite a journey from Egypt to Hebron, but that's what Yaakov requests of Yosef. Vayomar, and Yosef says, Anochi e'aseh, I will do kidvarecha.
Rabbi, isn't it also isn't it very important that he precedes this by saying to Yosef, look, I buried your mother on the road. I didn't bury your mother there. I buried her on the road when she died, but this is where I want to be buried. So he's sort of like, he starts with that before because I guess he anticipates Joseph's question is, well, you know, you didn't bury my mother there, and you buried her where you were, and you're here now. So he might have thought, you know, why do you want to go back there since my mother isn't even there?
Indeed, in previous years, we've covered that topic of why does Yaakov need to bring up about Rachel at this moment, and it seems to be that Yosef never really understood why his mother didn't have the same treatment as Leah. And so Yaakov sort of waits until this moment to justify his decision to bury Rachel derech Ephrata, and then makes the ask for himself to be buried with Leah, right? Which is a hard thing for the son of Rachel to receive, but he needs to make that explanation before making this request. So, indeed.
Rabbi, it's
Yeah.
not that far a distance from Beit Lechem to Hebron. I was wondering why he couldn't have moved Rachel eventually to
Yeah, so the
Hebron.
formulation that Yaakov uses is Meta alai Rachel, that Rachel died suddenly upon me during childbirth. And so the implication there, as we've studied in previous years, is that there was something that drove Yaakov to bury Rachel right there and then where she died. And part of it might have been that it was during childbirth. That was a very messy situation, and transporting her to Hebron, even though it was close, was really not so pragmatic, and it would have been undignified to do so.
And with a newborn.
So there was a lot. There was a newborn. There were several factors which Yaakov sort of intimates in explaining why he needed to bury Rachel on the side of the road and not even, so far away and even not nearby in Hebron, right? Which, as you said, is not even by camel, is not a huge distance. So Yaakov is in the defensive in terms of his position here, asking for himself to be buried, very far from where they're living. And he needs to justify that request by saying that it's important for him to be with his forefathers. So why he's choosing to not be with Rachel is because of the continuity that he wants with his grandfather and father, to be in this place that Abraham bought as the first chalukah, the first sort of allotment of the Jewish people in terms of owning a plot in Israel, right? This was the burial cave that Abraham bought to demonstrate that the promise of the land was going to be concretized even through a bill of sale, right? So Yaakov wanted to substantiate that transaction by having himself be in that place. Indeed, the subtext here is of Yosef saying, I will do this, is that I'm a little bit offended that you're not going to be buried next to my mother, but nevertheless, I will do this. And so why is it that Yosef needs, after taking the Shavua, that he will do this? Why does he then repeat, I will do exactly as your word? Because it's clear from the way that Yaakov asks that he's looking for reassurance. When you make an ask, and have to placate a lot in the ask itself, it's clear that you're unsure whether or not the person you're requesting from will comply with your request. And so Yosef here says, don't worry, Dad, I'll follow through on your request. Anochi e'aseh kidvarecha. So there are, Esther, go ahead, and then I want to,
Okay. Yeah,
go ahead.
I wonder if any rabbi mentioned the question, why didn't Yaakov ask Yosef also to take the bones of Rachel and move it? He could do that and move it to Marat HaMachpelah.
Right. So the Midrash asks that question and wonders why they were not reunited. And the answer that it gives is that when the Jews were exiled from Yerushalayim, they were taken down that road of Derech Hebron, which we know today it's called Derech Hebron, the road that leads from Yerushalayim to Hebron. It's like Route 60? Isn't that
60?
Yeah, Route 60. That's where you have your place, Dan, right?
Yeah, I watch them all the time going past me.
Yeah. So the answer that it gives is that Rachel needed to be there to comfort her children as they were exiled from Yerushalayim, and to be there to cry on behalf of them for their speedy return. Right, so it's a rabbinic justification of the decision of Yaakov to not, reinter. But we see Rachel as, kol mivaka al baneha, kol berama, right? Nishma, that there's a voice that's heard from up high. It's the voice of Rachel, right? This is the Haftorah for Rosh Hashanah, that we say that Rachel is going to be the maternal voice which ushers the Jewish people back to their homeland as they come up that path, they left that path from Yerushalayim and they'll return, through that thoroughfare on their way back to Yerushalayim. So it doesn't necessarily explain why Yaakov did not do it, but at least it explains the everlasting presence of Rachel in that location.
Thank you.
So the two sort of textual pieces that I want to drill a little bit more into in the time we have remaining are first this notion of v'shachavti im avotai, that I will lie down with my fathers. The language of the Torah in terms of death avoids the word mavet. So in the beginning of this section, we have Vayikruvu Yimei Yisrael Lamut, that Yaakov knows he's going to die. And so why is it that when Yaakov describes himself as dying, it uses the word v'shachavti, that I will lie, and it doesn't use the word, umoti. And then when the narrator of the Torah describes the actual passing of Yaakov, it also avoids the word mate. And instead, in source number 2, we see Vayechal Yaakov letzavot et banav. After Yaakov finished giving all of the instructions to his children, via asof raglav el hamita, they drew his feet onto his bed, right? Which indicated that he was sort of sitting up in bed, but not really mobile. But they put him flat on the bed, which is what we do when somebody passes. We lie them down flat on the ground or on a lowered bed. Vayigva, and he took his Vayigva literally means he expired, right? The English translation here, and he breathed his last breath, Vayasef elamav, and he was gathered to his people. So we have sort of three, descriptions here of or even four descriptions of death without using the word itself, right? The vayachal is like, and he completed what he was meant to do with giving his children the Masorah, the tradition. V'yasef, he was gathered his feet onto his bed, right? So technically he was positioned in a place where his body, was able to stop working. Vayigva, he stopped breathing. His last breath happened, and that was it. And then he was gathered onto his people. So we have sort of all these euphemisms for death without actually saying, that he died. So why is it that the Torah avoids the use of the explicit use of the word mate? And this is a consistent theme. It does the same thing with Abraham and with Yitzchak. It uses these terms of Vayigva, V'yasef, not Vayamat. And so Rashi quotes a midrash where he explains Umita lo ne'emra bo, that the word death is not mentioned in this case. Amar Rabbi Yaakov, and the midrash says, it's quoted in Masechet Ta'anit on Hayamud Bet, Yaakov Avinu lo meit, that he actually did not die. What does that mean, that he did not die?
His soul was still there.
Exactly,
Yeah,
right?
it's
So
only the body.
this is a indication that there is eternal life for the spirit, for the neshama, for the part of us that is non-physical. And so by not using the word mita sort of has this finality to it, that that death means sort of a permanent stopping, right? And so the Torah wants to avoid that by showing that our time on earth is about our physical existence, but our metaphysical existence lasts forever. So that's one way to understand Yaakov Avinu lo meit, that his spirit soared and returned to its maker and had eternal life. There's another way of understanding Yaakov Avinu lo meit, which is that, and Chazal elaborate on this as well, that Yaakov Avinu lo meit, because Vayachal Yaakov letzavot panav, because he had completed passing on his messages, his life lessons, his wisdom to his children. And so his life continues on via his progeny. Right? So there's no cessation of spirit or of life, because the life that he brought into the world gives him the ultimate nitzchiyut, the ultimate continuity, right? But it's contingent upon there being a passing along of the tradition, right? So these instructions that Yaakov gives about the importance of being buried in Eretz Yisrael and all the other brachot that he gave to his 12 children on his deathbed, right? That is how Yaakov never dies, because his ethical sort of achievements and his ethical standing has ongoing representation through his children. So that's another way of understanding all of these different ways of avoiding the word death, is that Yaakov continues on through his progeny.
So
Jill.
Rabbi,
That's true for everybody, Rabbi, isn't it? Pretty much.
yeah, but Rabbi, isn't
I
it?
wish it was.
Well,
But sadly, I have been involved in many families in which there were no children to the person who passed,
that's
or
that's true.
the children who are alive are older and themselves don't have children, or the children the children who are there, the children who are alive aren't there at the burial because there's been a break in the family, and
Well,
Or they don't carry on the tradition of their
or
parents.
indeed, or they've taken different paths,
Right.
and are not going to sustain the ethical sort of achievements of their, of their parents and grandparents. So there is a lot of discontinuity, and the phrase of Yaakov Avinu Lo Meit hinges on the continuity of his children being around his deathbed, and it's something I share, with everyone who is blessed, to be there in the days and hours and even moments before the passing of a loved one, is that this is the ideal way to go, to have your children at your bedside. That's, this is the image that's painted by, is it Rembrandt, I think? I forget who paints there's a famous painting of Jacob's deathbed scene. And that's sort of the best and ideal image that we all should merit, to experience with our own progeny. And that's how, the book of Breshit ends, with Yaakov's deathbed and his not really dying because of his ultimate, continuity through his progeny. Jim, go ahead.
It all goes back to the legacy of that he passes on to his children and his grandchildren.
Indeed. Yeah,
That's the perfect description.
yeah, that's the key word there, right?
Mhm.
The legacy is that ethical standing, those life lessons, those messages. That's what has continued, existence beyond the body's expiration.
well, that's the whole Torah, that it's not so much a physical history as a spiritual history of the Jews. And so that there is the physical body because we're human, but it's the spiritual thing that's important. Isn't that why say Yishmael, who came together with Yitzchak to bury their father, but he's not buried there, and Esav is not buried in Machpelah. And also we talk about the 12 tribes, the 12 sons, but we don't include the mothers Bilhah and Zilpah. We don't include them, even though obviously it's their children. It's because it's a spirit. It's not just the physical thing; it's the spiritual legacy.
Indeed. I want to make sure we cover one other important point here, which is the second sort of phrase that I wanted to drill into, which is the very end of the first source, where Yosef says, Anochi e'aseh kidvarecha, I will do as you do, right? I will do as you have said, I will do as you do. So the commentaries wonder, why is it that he needed to repeat that he would do it? He's already sworn to that effect. So perhaps it was because of the insecurity that, as we mentioned, that Yaakov felt making this request, given Yosef's mother didn't have the same resting place. And so Yosef feels the insecurity of his father and wants to reassure him. But the Eish Tamid brings Adat Zekanim, another commentary, which I found to be absolutely fascinating and very much reflective of how our world actually works. So Anochi Aseh Kidvarecha, this is in source number 5 here. He says, the Midrash says that Kishem Sha'ata Mitzaveni Kach, just like you made the request of me to do this for you. Kach ani mitzaveh la'achi b'shat mitati. I will also do the same to my brothers, to my children at the moment of my death, laha'aloti mikan, to take me up from Egypt. She'amar la'achav pakad yifkad elokim etchem, that Hashem should surely remember, right? He used the same formula that Yaakov used when making the request of Yosef, and Yosef used that same formula in his requests. And let's look at that inside here in source number 5, at the very end of Sefer Shmot, at the very end of Sefer Breshit, before we get to Shmot. Vayomer Yosef el Achav, he says to his brothers, right? It's interesting, is Achav here just his brothers, or is it inclusive of his sons? Are his sons really trustworthy enough, having been reared in Egypt, to be the ones to be fully responsible for the transport back to Israel after the 210 years of servitude? Or maybe he's just saying he wants all the tribes to be knowledgeable of this, so that whoever can do it will do it. So Vayomer Yosef el Achav Anochi meitz, here I am dying. Ve'elokim pakod yifkod etchem, Hashem will remember you, ve'aleh etchem min ha'aretz azot, and will take you eventually out of this land. Right, to the land that he promised to my father, to our grandfather, and our great-grandfather. Ba Yosef et bnei Yisrael lemor. And here he has them also take a shvua of pakod yifkad elokim etchem v'halitem et atzmotai mizeh. So the same language of ha'alitem et atzmotai mizeh, to carry up my bones from here. Right. The difference, of course, is he asked for his bones because he knows that his body will have deteriorated by that point. And he doesn't ask for immediate transport because he knows that that will be a diss to the Egyptian people for it to happen immediately, to have their second in command not be buried in their land, might have caused a quicker sort of turnabout for the Egyptian people, thinking highly about the Jewish people. That happens eventually, but not immediately. And so Yosef here makes similar arrangements, right? Whereas Yaakov asks for his body to be interred immediately. They wait 30 days, but then they go. And then with Yosef, he asks for his bones eventually in the years ahead, really in the centuries ahead, to be brought to be buried in Eretz Yisrael. So the Midrash links Yosef's decision to Yaakov's request. And the language of Anochi Aseh Kidvarecha doesn't just mean I will do as your word for you. It means I will do like your word for myself. And what is it that triggers people to take care of making arrangements for themselves? When their parents
not do it.
When their parents pass and they realize how important it is to have dignified arrangements. And many people here can appreciate this, and I've sat with several of you already to just work through a few of the details of final arrangements, but I have a very hard time getting through to a younger crowd who believe, that they are immortal and that this will never happen. That it's important to have a will, that it's important to have a living will, that it's important to have a healthcare proxy. All of these pieces are important, but oftentimes I find that I get the email or the response to my email with this information after somebody has had a close encounter with death. Maybe not themselves, but with a relative, a parent, a family member, a friend. And if something doesn't go right, or even if it does go right, but they want themselves to have a similar experience, they want to set that plan up sooner rather than later. And so we see that phenomena with Yosef as well, that when his father comes to him and makes that request, that's when he makes the commitment in his mind that he's going to do the same thing, and that he sets that into motion, because he realizes that it's probably going to be even more complicated for himself than it was for his father. And we
None of
often
the other
have,
brothers, none of the
Um,
other brothers think similarly.
yeah, it's a great question, and the Midrash actually says that when he says this to his brothers, and it says "Ve'ha'ela etchem min haaretz hazot," that he will take you out of this land. He is speaking with a double entendre, saying that not just is he going to take your progeny out of this land, but he should really take you out of this land too. You should make the same arrangement, that your children should carry you out of Mitzrayim and bury you in Eretz Yisrael. We don't have mention of that request being made or that actually happening in the text itself about the other 12 or 11 brothers making the same thing, but the Midrash here makes that point, Danny, that he's indicating that it would be good for them to copy him and their father in terms of making those final arrangements. So what we see, from Parshat Vayechi, which is all about living, right? That also the way that we transition from life really does matter in terms of giving our life the ultimate sort of eternity and lasting beyond our physical time on earth. And that these arrangements really do make a difference. So I know I'm preaching a little bit to the choir here, people who have been seasoned by life, and know that it's important to have these logistics set up. But sometimes we need to impress on our children or our friends to do the same, because it just gets so unseemly when none of these arrangements have been made. And again, this year I had the situation of someone in the shul who passed, and the first decision was, where do we bury them? Where do they want to be buried? I never asked them. Well, her brother wants her to be buried, there, and I want her to be buried here. What do we do, Rabbi? There's no good outcome there.
Yeah.
And those divisions about those decisions can last, forever. And so having these arrangements made ahead of time will save your surviving, loved ones from having to make decisions that separate them. So I know you know that, and I'm just, again, as I said, preaching to the choir here, but I get reminders of that far too often.
My brother passed away 2 years ago. Suddenly, had nothing arranged, nothing done ahead of time, and the poor family scrambled, and it was really terrible.
Yeah,
I had to go through.
it's really uncomfortable on so many levels. It costs a lot more to purchase a grave when you can't research, where and how and everything is. There's and the cemeteries know this. They have a rushed fee. It's horrible, but they they take advantage of people's procrastination.
I just want to add, in addition to the living will and the healthcare proxy, if the person did not want to be resuscitated, that's very important that that paper be where people know where it is,
Yep,
out in the open.
Yeah.
indeed.
How complicated is it to be buried in Israel?
It's a great question. We don't have so much time to talk about it. During COVID, it was impossible. And so a lot of internment happened temporarily with the condition that when it was possible, they would be reinterred in Israel. But it's a lot easier for it to happen now. I mean, especially with the direct flight from El Al, from Logan, they have a section of the plane for bodies. And I've made the arrangements many times. Henry Fjorstein is the person who has the head of the Chevra Kadisha in Boston, who has the contact with El Al. and we've done it many a time from Boston. In New York, it's even easier because the volume is much higher. And so you can assume, you know, that it's available almost on a daily basis from coming out of JFK or out of Newark. But it's costly, but you know, I mean, my wife and I have our arrangements made for burial in Eretz Yisrael, and you know, we have you know, like, I don't know if our kids know, but like our siblings know where we have our estate plan folder, right? So
Mhm.
that's, you know, that when that's something that we did already 10, 15 years ago. But we have all that stuff arranged, and you know, the DNR and all that, you know, in one place, that our estate attorney helped us with a halachic will, with a estate plan, all of that stuff, easily accessible, for when it's needed in 120 years.
Amen. Yeah.
Mhm.
Amen.
Yeah, and you have to buy a place in Israel, or is it, how
It-
does it work
It
in Israel?
depends. We could have a conversation about it
Okay.
offline, but it depends if you have citizenship or not. Yeah. So we could talk about it more.
Yeah. Were
Is it-
Yosef,
okay.
was Yosef mummified as well as Yaakov? And-
It indicates that it says Vayichan too, that he was, that Yaakov was. We don't know about Yosef, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. But I could check that for you.
Yaakov was and not Yosef? I thought Yosef was.
I don't. It was one of them where it uses that word. I forget which one.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Deborah Kadusha was really good in those days. Mummify you, they could do everything to you.
Yeah, extra services, you know.
Wow.
Okay, I wish everyone
Thank you, Rabbi.
a bright,
So
warm
thank
day
you,
ahead,
Dr.
and we'll continue our learning again next Tuesday.
Next
Thank
Tuesday, I
you.
start teaching, so
Have
I'll
a good day.
Have a good
Okay.
day, everyone.
Yom Tov.
Bye. Yom
Thank
Tov.
you for my mother's merit. Yeah, having the class.